So I have a question, and it is one of those like church education questions that I just kind of want to check to see where we are. And in the Protestant tradition, we have two sacraments. Do you know what they are? Baptism and communion, right. So what's a sacrament? Sacred, yep. Sacred practice. Mm-hmm.
Visible sign of an invisible grace.
Amanda comes from behind. A visible sign of an invisible grace. Yes, so there's kind of like three parts to how a sacrament gets defined. One is that it was gifted to us within Scripture. So that's where we get, we take the words of institution from either the Gospels or from Corinthians, where we're familiar with those words that kind of hold this practice. And it is a visible, tangible mark or gift, so water with baptism, bread and wine with communion, that reminds us of the grace of God and brings us closer to God and closer to each other. So with the sacrament of baptism, we are welcoming someone into our community and saying, we covenant with you to be with you throughout your life, to do life with you, to hold you in the light of God's love, and to be active members of our community with you. So whether we are welcoming an infant into baptism, which is a practice within our church, or an adult who is choosing to be baptized into the church, that is, it is through that water of rebirth that we welcome them in. And then communion is one that we practice more often, usually on the first Sunday of the month, though that is not in the gospel, turns out. But it's how we practice it here. And that is that we share these gifts of bread and wine, or gluten-free bread and juice, to literally take in strength to go a little bit further on our journey of faith. And it is a simple gift of food and drink, things that are necessary for our bodies, that reminds us how we are nourished, both physically, but also in that metaphysical, spiritual realm as well, to just keep living this life that we have been called to travel in the way of Jesus. And it does take some physical and some metaphysical energy to do it, right? It is not easy things that we do here. And so at least once a month, we remember that we are not just nourished by each other, although we are, but also by God moving in between us as well. So what counts as communion? Anything. Okay, Cindy. All right. Just blowing it wide open, right? Yeah. What has to happen for it to be communion? Two or more gathered. Yeah, I mean, communion is something that we do in community, right? It is communion with God and with each other. And so even, like, no one takes communion alone. Even if I go and I visit someone, I always take it with them, because it is a community meal, because we're doing life together, right? Like, it's not like, oh, I'm just eating this food and drinking this drink to like get my own self down the road a little bit further on this journey of faith. But it really is a symbol that we're all being nourished by God's presence among us and by our presence with each other to carry on beyond just the next right thing, the next step, right? And so it is a community practice. That's part of it. What else? Intention. Yeah, so a ritual is anything that we do with attention and intention, and this is arguably the central ritual in faith. And there's a tension between how we honor the fact that it is our central ritual. So do we do it every week? So some faith communities do it every week because it's really important and they want to keep it central to how they gather. Others, like our practice here, is we do it once a month, so it sort of elevates it a little bit because we don't do it all the time, which means it's special when we do it. There's no wrong way. It's just, how do you do it in your community? But you're right, like, we do it with attention, so we enter into a particular mind space when we receive those gifts. And it has a particular meaning based on how we set the table, right? What else? What makes it communion? Exchange. Say more about that, Kathy.
That you're taking in something from someone else into your own self and giving something back to them.
You're taking something from someone else and giving something back to them. Yeah. So I don't know if you notice, but I hand you the bread. When I am serving, it is a gift. And so sometimes we want to go and take it ourselves, right? But that's kind of trying to do it under your own steam a little bit. And so it's a practice that I have. I keep it a little bit closer to my body, and I give it to you, because how many of us are willing to give something to someone else, but then if someone says, "Do you need help?" And we're like, "Oh, no. Like, I couldn't possibly receive help from someone else." Right? So it's a practice of actually receiving, and it is a gift to give, right? Like it is reciprocal, but it is also a practice of receiving a gift of God. That grace is something that we don't necessarily deserve. It just comes to us and is a blessing, right? And so practicing receiving that blessing, not because I had to work for it, not because I reached for it myself, not because I earned it myself, but just because that nourishment, that grace is there for you. No matter who you are, no matter where you are on life's journey, you have a place at the table. And there's help, there's support, there's love for you here. So how do we do communion at Vista Grande? Free and open, yeah. The first time I was ever at a church that had an open invitation to communion, I bawled my eyes out because I had to go through 2 years of catechism class to be confirmed, and then I was able to take communion, but not at every church that was called the same thing my church was. Right? So it was like, here we can vet you, but we have to vet you to be able to receive these good gifts and make sure that you're good enough and educated enough. And so when someone said to me for the very first time, "If you want to be here, you can," it was an incredible gift. And that's why I say every week that there's no statement of faith that you have to sign, no creeds you have to recite, but just listening to that subtle voice inside you. Are you hungry for the gifts that are offered here? And if you are, they are yours. They always have been. What else do we do here? Low barrier. What do you mean by that? Yeah. If you're celiac or have issues with gluten, we're not going to make you sick, right? Yeah. And also there's no difference in how we serve everyone, right? Like I have been in a part of a church where it was like the people who ate wheat got the good bread, and then you had to kind of step out of line to go get your sad gluten-free bread and then come back in. Right? And so we have made the decision that everyone is eating the same thing because your health needs are important to us, and it doesn't make you other. It makes you one of us, and we want to adjust how we hold the space so that you are welcome and not kind of have a sticker on you that says something's wrong with you, right? And same thing with our wine, which is, good old Welch's grape juice, right? Because there are those of us who have issues with alcohol for whatever reason, and that's not safe for us to receive that part of this meal. And so to say that, to offer juice instead is an open invitation that really does, in this really small, subtle way, that means the world to those of us with a previous history of alcohol, myself included, that I am not excluded from this table. So, I have a story in 5 parts. So this is what you're probably familiar with. Welch's. I almost got Juicy Juice, 100% juice for 100% kids. Yeah. But they didn't have only grape juice. It was like grape and something else. And I was like, no. Okay, we're gonna go classic for this one. And gluten-free bread. So this is the one we're familiar with, right? Like this looks like communion. This is part 1. So a couple of weeks ago, I was at a professional education, and they didn't realize that 2 of us needed to not have gluten for whatever reason. And we were at a camp, and they had brought like some wine and seltzer and stuff for like a happy hour that we were having later, but they didn't have it on hand for the communion ritual that we opened our time together with. But if you've ever been to camp, you know about purple drink, or like a school cafeteria, or there's there's purple drink, right? It's kind of like Kool-Aid. It doesn't taste like grape, but we kind of trick ourselves into thinking it's like grape. But it just tastes like purple. Yeah, we know. Okay, so I was the special kid who couldn't have wine for sure, and couldn't have wheat either, which makes communion a little bit hard. And so, being the resourceful pastors we are, you put 10 pastors in a room. They went and they grabbed potato chips, gluten-free, right? Yeah. So my communion that night was potato chips and purple drink. I didn't have purple drink especially, so I got orange juice instead. It kind of does the same kind of like, okay, that's a strange pairing, but we'll see it through. So now I have a confession to make. In 2020 and 2021, when we were mostly gathering online, we did communion together, and we all kind of had to figure out our own communion elements. I was working full-time at the time and woke up Sunday morning usually about 9:30, and put myself together to try to get to church on time, which was 10 feet away from my bedroom. But inevitably, every Sunday, or every communion Sunday, I was like, crap, I have forgotten that it is the first Sunday of the month. What do I have that could possibly count as communion? Here's what I came up with. I won't subject you to the worst pairing I ever did, which was a cracked pepper cracker and one of these things. You couldn't see it in my chalice, but it was like kind of red looking, so if anybody caught like a glimpse of it, sometimes it was orange vitamin water, so I was real careful not to tip it so I wouldn't be found out. But I have some gluten-free multigrain crackers and a sparkling ice, but is that communion? Yeah, right. Because we were gathering together and we were taking in this food together with attention and intention, and we were remaining connected in ways that we needed to survive that time, right? And I'm sure you can tell me if during that time you had some creative pairings. Yeah? What was yours? Chocolate chip cookies and coffee. All right. Muffins and white hot chocolate. Okay. What else? Yeah, I gotta say the cracked pepper cracker was the worst, but it helped us feel connected. We figured out new ways of doing this ritual together to stay with one another even when we were separate. And so this is a little bit of a better pairing, but it won't offend me if this is not the one you pick. What about a granola bar and Powerade? Go for it. Yeah. What's that? Yeah, the power of Jesus. Yeah, there you go. Electrolytes. Yeah. So one of the more meaningful communions I have ever had was actually these two things. I was with a friend who had just lost his mom. We came to Garden of the Gods to spread her ashes. He had a Powerade and a granola bar, and those of us who gathered with him shared in these simple gifts. And it has stuck with me as an incredible gift of communion in a space of nature, right? This might be what you take hiking, right? And it is literally taking in that nourishment to literally get you a little bit further down the trail, right? Maybe returning you back home after a strenuous hike up. But these things do the communion thing. Even this. So someone said coffee and muffins, coffee and a chocolate chip cookie. This one is actually pretty special to me. A couple of months ago, you know that my dog passed away, my last day of vacation. And I had a beloved of mine who took me to coffee while we were waiting at the vet to see what was going to happen. And I was kind of just like a basket case, just waiting. That dog was really important to me. Was my mom's dog, and I had him. She had him the first half of his life, and after she passed, I had him, and so linked me to my mom. And I was just like this mess. And he bought my coffee, and he came back with this is a pumpkin muffin, but he came back with a lemon poppy seed muffin, and he called it my emotional support muffin. But it was something that gave me a little bit of hope, a little bit of grace, a little bit of sunshine on a pretty dark day. And so coffee and a muffin is still communion, right? It opened up my spirit, and I was able to receive some of the love that was there, some of the hope that was there, even if I felt hopeless that day. And it did the communion thing. Connected me to God and to another person, letting me know that I wasn't alone, that there was nourishment for me to take that one last step, that one next step. So when we say, "Come, for all things have been made ready," maybe this is what we mean. I imagine we often think of the story, that parable, as those people who are too busy to connect, right? I have all this other stuff going on. There's stuff that is keeping me from coming to the banquet. But that text is actually my ordination text. It was what was preached at my ordination, and it is so spiritually important to me, and it's a text I wonder about a lot. So we say, "You're welcome at the table," right? So often we mean the communion table, we mean the potluck table, we mean maybe the decision-making table. There's all sorts of tables that we are at in community. But I wonder what's being served, right? So if we had kept just doing wheat bread and alcohol, not everyone is welcome at that table. And so we shifted. We have our Welch's grape juice and our gluten-free bread. So then in this classical understanding of the ritual, everyone that we can manage is welcome. But then also, there are other ways of connecting. God doesn't just show up in the church. God shows up on the nature trail. God shows up at Garden of the Gods with Powerade and a nut bar. God showed up when resourceful pastors, all they had was juice and potato chips. It was a beautiful worship service where I did feel ministered to, and they realized in real time, oh, we didn't draw the circle wide enough, and so we have to think outside the box. We have to think creatively so that everyone is welcome at our table. There was 2 of us with a problem with alcohol, 2 of us with a problem with gluten, and I was the one with both. And so they really made an effort to make sure that everyone was able to be fed. During COVID, when none of us had a plan or a schema for what we were going through, right? Everything we knew how to do was kind of scrapped, and we had to figure it out in real time. Sometimes it's, a vitamin water and pepper crackers, or, a multigrain cracker and sparkling ice. It's a berry lemonade. But we still figured out how to connect with one another. And we can heal each other through simple acts of feeding and thoughtfulness. An emotional support muffin and a cup of coffee can go a long way on a day that feels really heavy. A friend of mine is a trans man who is an ecumenical Catholic priest, so not Roman Catholic, but an ecumenical Catholic priest. And he recently posted a picture of a communion table. And often they are carved sometimes with a message, take and eat, take and drink, something like that. This one had a question on it that I think will sit with me for a really long time. And that is, has everyone been fed? Has everyone been fed? And so you may not connect with the classical bread and juice communion. But as we set a table with attention and intention, with all the different ways that this communion with one another and with God can look, there is something for you here. Maybe it's a muffin. Maybe it's a cracker, maybe it's a potato chip, a granola bar. Whatever is your seat at the table, the food that you need, you can find it here. And so on this World Communion Sunday, where we think about all of the ways across the world that this meal is celebrated, may you find the plate of food you need. The drink you need. Maybe even mix and match it a little bit. If you want a granola bar and some coffee, who am I to tell you no? But know that there is nourishment for you here. People who are joining you at the table, thinking creatively, attending it with attention and intention, with that deep desire to connect with God and to connect with you. And so, dear ones, come, all things have been made ready. Come, find the plate that you need, the cup that you need. You are welcome. So guess what? Pretty much everything got tried. Some people took potato chips. Some people told me, I'm old-fashioned, I'm doing it the way I always find, which is fine. That's why we keep this thing too. But there's also a growing edge. There's one thing that didn't get taken. Berry lemonade, right? It's the right color-ish, but this is the only thing that didn't get opened. But that's okay, because that means we're setting the table for people who may not be here yet. And that's good, right? It means that we've set a table that still has room for imagination, that has room for possibility. And just because this wasn't taken today doesn't mean that it won't be next First Sunday. Don't worry, this isn't coming back. But we talk about the table as a table of possibility, the cup of hope and new promise. And so may we be creative in our welcome. When we say that we draw the circle wider, when we say that we dream of a world that looks and acts differently than the one that we've got, the way that we set the table is a huge piece of that. And so, dear friends, may you be nourished by your coffee and muffin, by your orange juice and potato chip, which was a combo that someone did take on purpose, by your bread and your juice, your Powerade, and your granola bar, whatever way you come to this table, there is food for you, nourishment and connection to be had. And so, dear ones, may we carry that nourishment out of this space and into the world, desperate for that same kind of connection. Amen.